The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not be afraid any longer, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your belongings and give alms. Provide money bags for yourselves that do not wear out, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven that no thief can reach nor moth destroy. For where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. Gird your loins and light your lamps, and be like servants who await their master's return from a wedding, ready to open immediately when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival. Amen, I say to you, he will gird himself, have them recline at table, and proceed to wait on them, and should be come in the second or third watch, and find them prepared in this way. Blessed are those servants. Be sure of this, if the master of the house had known the hour when the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be prepared, for at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." Then Peter said, "Lord, is this parable meant for us or for everyone?" And the Lord replied, "Who then is the faithful and prudent steward whom the master will put in charge of his servants to distribute the food allowance at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master on arrival finds doing so. Truly I say to you, the master will put the servant in charge of all of his property. But if that servant says to himself, 'The master is delayed in coming,' and begins to beat the manservants and maidservants, to eat and drink and get drunk, then that servant's master will come on an unexpected day and at an unknown hour, and will punish the servant severely, and assign him a place with the unfaithful. That servant who knew his master's will, but did not make preparations nor act in accordance with his will, shall be beaten severely. And the servant who was ignoring of his master's will, but acted in a way deserving of a severe beating, shall be beaten only lightly. Much will be required of the person entrusted with much, and still more will be demanded of the person entrusted with more. Come follow me. Discipleship Reflections for the Sunday Gospel for Liturgical Year C by Daniel H. Muggenberg. 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Our scripture passage for this Sunday comes from the Gospel of Luke 12:32 through 48. This text is a continuation of Jesus' teaching on the need to place our trust and security in Him, and not in our material possessions. The right use of material possessions is an essential response of faith for disciples, and Luke's Gospel contains more references on this topic than any other Gospel. Jesus begins his section by specifically addressing the fear of insecurity and insufficiency that can lead a person to care only for themselves rather than generously caring for the needs of others. In the verses immediately preceding this passage, the Lord instructed the disciples about God's care for the ravens, the lilies, and grass on the field. If God cares for these created things so well, then the Lord will care even more for disciples who seek His kingdom. Jesus teaches the disciples that they can trust in the Father's loving and caring providence over their lives, because God is in control of all things. With that blessed assurance, there is no need to fear. Rather, disciples who have received the kingdom must be disciples who freely give the kingdom to others. For this reason, the sharing of resources becomes a witness of faith in God's protection and providence. Reflection question. How can the fears of insufficiency and insecurity cause people today to care only for themselves and not for the needs of others? What other fears can cause people to fail in generosity? Why do you think the phrase, "Do not be afraid," is one of the most common statements of Jesus? What has helped you overcome your fears so as to be guided by faith and trust in God? Who is an example of someone who focuses more on heavenly treasure than earthly treasure? This teaching on the right uses of material possession then moves into a series of parables that describes different people's actions concerning accountability and good stewardship. It should be noted that the accountability Jesus refers to is not just a once-for-all experience at the Last Judgment, the end of the world, or the death of the individual Christian. These parables are used in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke to communicate such an apocalyptic understanding of the Master's return, but the Gospel of Luke implies that the Master's return to check on his servants occurs in the course of every day and is an ongoing experience of discipleship. The emphasis on more regular accountability and daily judgment is a distinctive theme in Luke's Gospel. The first parable is about servants who wait for their master's return from a wedding. They are the ones who are watchful, meaning they are prepared by prayer and faithful fulfillment of their duties. The master's return for them is a cause of joy, and they are invited to participate in a great banquet in which the master serves them. We should not be surprised by such an action because Jesus said in the Last Supper that he was among them as one who serves. The meaning of this parable is that faithful servants have nothing to fear. The Master's return will be a time of great blessings as God's greatness is revealed in humble service. The servants were eager for the Master's return. It was what they were living for. Obviously, this parable is about the return of Jesus and our need to be servants who are watchful, that is, praying and faithfully fulfilling the responsibility of God has given us. It can be easy to fall asleep in our faith every day and to forget the task the Lord has entrusted to us, especially the right use of material possessions. The master of the household may come at a time in the course of our day to see how faithfully we are in generously caring for the needs of others. When we fall asleep in that duty, then we fail to act according to Master's will. Reflection questions. As you hear this parable, whom do you think most looks forward to the coming of Jesus in our time? When have you been most faithful in your use of material possessions? Have you ever felt uncomfortable because someone greater than you was actually serving you? How would you feel to have God be your servant at the eternal banquet? How does the image of God as servant motivate you as a disciple today? The second parable is slightly different but continues the theme of faithful stewardship of material possessions. Rather than the coming of Jesus being a positive event would look forward to, for those who are unprepared, the coming of Jesus will be like a thief in the night. That is an interesting image. If we are mindful that the household belongs to the Lord, then his return is a cause of great joy. But if we begin to deceive ourselves by thinking the household is ours, then the return of Jesus will seem like a thief coming to take back what we falsely believe to be ours. This image of the return of Jesus being like a thief in the night was deeply rooted in the mind of the early church and is used elsewhere in the New Testament. Whether we eagerly await the Lord as the master of the house or fear the Lord as the thief depends upon how we are living our discipleship. To be ready for the Lord in Luke's Gospel requires that disciples have the following characteristics. They must trust in God and not in possessions. They live out the petitions of the Lord's Prayer. They are to be generous in caring for the needs of others. They are to stay focused on the presence of God and remain attentive to the Lord's Word. And they are to remain watchful and persevere in their prayer. The coming of Jesus in these parables is not just an event that will occur at the end or time or at the end of an individual's discipleship life. The coming of Jesus for each of us can happen on a daily basis as we encounter the Lord in others and are challenged to assist them in their need. Reflection question: which of these aspects of discipleship are most difficult for you to live? Which are easiest? If the Lord came to you this night, would you welcome with joy as the long-awaited master, or would you feel cheated as though a thief had broken into your life? How do you think Jesus has been presented to you this past week in the people and situations you have faced? The third parable is prompted by the question of Peter: Lord, is this parable meant for us or for everyone? Most probably, this third parable is addressed to those in positions of Christian leadership or ministry responsibility. The image of a household manager is interesting. The household manager was a fellow slave who was given two responsibilities. First, to oversee the activities of the other slaves and make sure that they were doing what was asked of them. And second, to serve the need of the other slaves by providing their food and materials. Thus, the household manager was accountable both to the master and to the other slaves. That's dual accountability. It is said that the true measure of a person's character is what they will do when no one else is watching. The manager in this parable thought the master wasn't watching, so he treated the other servants badly. God does pay attention to how we treat others. One of the morals of the story is that disciples cannot be faithful to God if they are abusing their roles and responsibilities or the other people in their lives. Although the parable is directed towards those entrusted with leadership responsibility, we should be careful to not define those roles too narrowly. Christian leadership is not only for those who are employed by the church or ordained for ministry. It includes many others as well. Parents are responsible for the Christian development of their children. Husbands and wives are responsible for the spiritual development of their spouses. Parish volunteers are responsible for serving those in their ministries. Teachers are responsible for giving good witness to their students. Each of us has some responsibility for others, and so each of us faces this dual accountability. It is important for disciples to evaluate how well they are fulfilling their responsibilities to others, and not just their responsibilities to God. Reflection question: how do you keep yourself from becoming like that manager when it comes to handling situations of leadership and responsibility in your life? To whom are you accountable for your Christian leadership? What practical examples can you think of in which people abuse their position and authority today for self-gain? How often do you pray for those who are accountable to you? Imagine that both God and those for whom you are responsible gave you a report card on how well you are fulfilling your responsibility of discipleship. What would be your grade from each? How can you seek to be spiritually accountable to those for whom you are responsible?